Hello, this is János with Real World Audio. Well, I am Real World Audio, and this is part 3 of the WinISD tutorial. We are getting to know WinISD. If you missed, then go back to the first episode. I am starting with downloading the software and showing it to those who never used it. And this is where we are now. And basically we are exploring the Fostex FE103 Sigma driver that Jean Hiraga used for LePetit. And what we have been experimenting is that when I just created the new project, and let's just, if you unclick the button, then it doesn't show the program. So here you have your different speaker models lined up here, and by clicking here, check the box and it shows it, uncheck it doesn't show. And then you can just choose to have one or the other or both, and you can give them different colors. That's how you can tell them apart. And so let's see, this is where we started. So I want to get to Hiraga's LePetit in a computer model, and we started by the program modeling this driver with a cabinet size and port tuning frequency that the program thought is optimal for the driver. But what is optimal for the driver? It uses calculations based on the TLA small parameters of the driver. It really is not giving you what the driver can do. It is your own brains that have to give purpose to the cabinet. The program cannot give purpose to the cabinet. You are the one who have to know what is the room size you want to work with, how the speaker is going to interact with your room, where the placement is going to be, and then you create a box size and tuning frequency to match your expectations. If you don't have any expectations or plans, then the computer will give you something, but it might be totally off from what you want your loudspeaker to do, because if it's not matched to your room but to some expectations that the software thinks might work for you, then you won't be very happy with the result. However, now I am showing you what we are doing is that we started with this small cabinet size, high tuning frequency that gives you a tiny tea kettle size tiny box for this 4-inch driver, tuned to up to the moon, like 90 hertz, really high. So it doesn't have any bass whatsoever. So you really, wow, that's it. That's what you get. Just highs, no real lows. You get some mid bass, but no lower mid bass and no deep bass whatsoever. And when we start increasing the cabinet volume size, that's when we can start to tune the frequency lower, because as we have seen in the previous episode, if we keep this small cabinet volume and we start tuning the frequency lower and lower, we just lose the bass response, the output. That small volume, the small lungs, basically the internal volume of the cabinet is the size of the lungs that you give to the driver. So the driver itself is like your chest muscles and your vocal cords, and the inside of the cabinet, the air, is the size of the lungs of the loudspeaker. And the bigger the lungs, the deeper and louder the sounds become. Just exactly the same as it happens with us human beings. Just look at little children. They have teeny weeny little lungs and like really high voices when they sing. Just think about the children's chorus, how high they sing. And think about the basso, the big giant man, the fat guy, and he sings really deep, really loud. So the same thing happens with the loudspeaker, and we started looking at doubling, or a little bit more than doubling the volume to 10 liters, tuning frequency going to 70 hertz instead of 90, and we almost doubled the available bass extension of the loudspeaker, and getting a useful region instead of from down to 120 hertz and rolling off hard below that. We are useful down to about 60 hertz. So that's a tremendous change. So when we go back to Jean Hiraga's design, let's just look at the... Where is it? I think, did I download? I think that's the article. Yes. So this is Jean Hiraga's article on the on LePetit, and this is in French. He has measurements for it and size. So based on this, you can build your own LePetit. And as you see, the width of the cabinet 35.2 centimeters, or here it's shown in millimeters, 352 millimeters. So it's a little wider than a foot, and a little less deep than a foot. It's 22 centimeters deep. And what's the height? 546. So it's a little bit taller than half a meter. And now he recommends it to build with a 19 to 20 millimeter thick cabinet. So basically times 2, that's how much we have to subtract to get the inner size of the cabinet. So basically the width of the air column inside the cabinet, instead of 352, it will be 312. The height, instead of 546, it will be 506. And instead of 227 deep, it will be 187 deep. And you multiply these numbers with each other, and you will get the volume, the internal volume, the lung size of the loudspeaker. And you will be astonished to learn that Jean Hiraga is giving us 33 liters cabinet size, which, let's just go back here to our WinISD model. As you see, in the beginning, it gave us 4 liters, and now Jean Hiraga is giving us 33 for LePetit, almost like 8 times the size of this basic alignment. So you see that you can experiment, and sometimes going really wildly off the beaten path, or where the computer models will take you, can give you really, really astonishing, surprising things that you would not expect drivers to do. And that's why people don't ever experience these tiny drivers singing deep, because the loudspeaker cabinets do not allow it. But in case your cabinet allows it, they can sing deep. So let's just punch in the values for Hiraga's cabinet. So he is 33 liters. And as you see, look at that. If you are keeping the 70 Hz tuning frequency, that extra size allows the driver to push tremendous energy to the low frequencies. And as you see, it's completely overtaking it. This, if you would put it in this cabinet tuned to 70 Hertz, it will be boomy AF. So what can we do to prevent this boominess? Let's just bring the tuning frequency lower. How about 60 Hertz? So now you see it's not as boomy, but it's still way, way, way higher than where the loudspeaker sings in the lower mid-range. We don't want to overtake the lower mid-range. That will always give us a boomy sound. And the smaller the room, the boomier it will get. So let's go 50 Hertz. So now with 50 Hertz, we are getting there. You see, now we are getting almost 91 dB. So we are getting to roughly the same energy where it sings around 500 Hertz. However, what you notice is that the little driver is not a miracle worker. For much of the mid bass, we are losing quite a bit of energy here compared to this smaller cabinet. So if you look at the tiny cabinet tuned to a very high tuning frequency of 90 hertz, then it's really strong here in the upper bass and strong in the upper half of the mid bass, but there around 86 hertz it's already catastrophic. So you will have very limited use for it. And when we look at this much bigger cabinet tuned way lower, what you will notice is that we have like a 5 dB drop in the mid bass. However, look at that. At 50 hertz, it's as strong as at 500 hertz. So basically, it means that before we had usefulness down to 100 hertz, and now we have usefulness to below 50 hertz. So even if I go here at this point where I am 44 hertz, and it's still singing strong at 44 hertz. This is pretty insane, right? Just a 4-inch driver, and it's bringing us into the 40s, and one you would think that there's a price to pay is that the mid bass we have a valley there, but that will work perfectly if you put it in a small room, which naturally would bring up these mid bass frequencies, and then it would be nice and flat. Of course, if you are a mid bass freak, so you want your bass guitar or your mid bass instruments to absolutely dominate the scene, it will never ever happen with this cabinet. But if you have a balanced taste, then in a small room, this loudspeaker will give you a nice and even response. And instead of having the boomy mid bass that you get with the usual small cabinets, that you have the small cabinet in a small room gives you a boomy mid bass and then no deep bass, nothing whatsoever below that. In a small room, you will get a nice and even mid bass plus a deep bass. So you don't need a subwoofer to add to your cabinet, and you don't need to fiddle around with DSP how to tame your mid bass, because the cabinet is doing it for you. And where did John Hiraga tune his cabinet? Let's go back to the design. Here you see it shows the port size, 13.9 centimeters deep port, 70 millimeter diameter. Let's punch those values to here. So let's see. Let's change the shape to circular shape. One port, and what was the diameter? 70 millimeters. So here it says centimeter, so that's 7 centimeter. So at this tuning frequency, that would be 8.6 centimeters long. What was the length? It was 13.9 centimeters long. So obviously, we need to go lower with the tuning frequencies. How low? Let's try 40 hertz. Let's check at the vent, because it calculates automatically what's the port length that you need to get that tuning frequency, and it says 16 centimeter long port. This is bigger than what Hiraga recommends us. So let's try tuning higher. There are some software where you can punch in the port length, and it will calculate the tuning frequency from there. This software doesn't do that, so you have to play around a while. Let's try 44 hertz. Maybe let's get rid of that point 35, 44 hertz, vents, bingo, 12.9 centimeter. We are getting pretty close to where Jean Hiraga's designs pointed at. And we could, again, just take it a little lower, maybe like 42 hertz. What's the vent? Oh, now it's 14.66, too big, right? Let's go 43 hertz. 43 hertz. What's that? Bingo! 13.75 centimeter, and Hiraga's is 13.9. So basically, we are in the ballpark. Getting any more precise, it won't help us at all because we don't know exactly how big the free air volume is, because when you look at it, there is going to be filling material inside the cabinet. The basket is taking away from the space. The port is taking away from the free air volume. Whatever amount of air sits inside the port, it does not count towards the free air volume. Also the filling, it even though it takes away from the filling volume, but it acts as if it enlarges the available free air volume, because it slows down the sound and the driver will think that the inner area is actually bigger than what is available. So now let's not fuss about any of those. You can't actually even possibly get any more precise. Plus, there will be such changes between your driver's actual working parameters compared to what you see in the datasheet, that that variation will be much bigger than this little error we have, because the free air volume is not 100% the same. We are in the ballpark. We are approximately plus or minus 10% compared to what Hiraga's design shows us, and this will tell us that we will have, when we model it, a similar response to what Jean Hiraga is getting from LePetit. So what's going on here? As you see, we have here at 43 Hz 88.5 dB compared to here at 500 Hz 90.8 dB. What's the difference? Oh, it's like 2.5 dB down at 43 Hz. That's pretty amazing for such Twitter driver. Although we have to add that here, let's see, when you are at 67 Hz, we are down to 85 dB. So that's like we are almost 6 dB down at 70 Hz. And now if you put it in a very large room that does not reinforce the mid-bass, you will there notice that this speaker is mid-bass shy, even though it will start picking up the energy even in a large room, just like the cats here playing around. They start picking up the energy. Kintaro. They start picking up the energy around 50 Hertz, and it will just get stronger and stronger down to 40 Hertz, and even at 40 Hertz it's pretty strong. And as you see, now we are running out of the range, so let's just adjust our range. How? Now you can stay in a chorus. We choose the crowbar, and frequency range, instead of 40 Hertz, let's choose 30 Hertz. Okay, let's see. As you see there, it does not continue down to 20 Hertz. It starts dropping here. Beyond 40 Hertz, it just starts losing the energy. How much? Let's see, what was here? The peak output was at almost 91 dB. Let's look for the minus 10 dB point. That would be 81 dB. Where is that? 36 Hertz. So when you think about what Torsten of Snake Oil Audio said of these speakers, that even though it's a 4-inch driver, but it sounds like a very big speaker, this is why. Because the minus 10 dB point is at 36 Hertz. And you need a reasonable size loudspeaker to have that nice deep bass extension. And as you see, it's the loudspeaker cabinet that is going to be the main responsible party to generate that extension. And now what would happen if we had a bigger driver than the 4-inch driver? what would happen is that instead of this hump, a bigger driver is more capable of filling up this range. And how can we do that? Let's see. Do I have that project? No, that's not that project. Let's just close it. Close the project. We will just create a new project. Let's just go through that. Where do I see Fostex? Fostex, click on it. 106, FE164, sorry, not 106, FE164. Let's choose that driver. Let's just vent it. Alignment. Let's choose the quasi Butterworth again. And then we show FE164. That's the name. So this is also a smallish driver, but it's not a 4-inch, it's a 6-inch driver. So it's a little bit bigger. So what does that little bit bigger mean? So let's just do the same thing with the box, give it the same volume as we gave for the FE103, 33 liters, and let's tune it to 43 hertz. You see? Check that out. You have a relatively similar response in the high frequency as the smaller model did. You see we have like a 2 dB higher output because it's a little bit more efficient. But as you see in the mid bass, it doesn't drop. It doesn't have this significant value. It still drops. Let's get rid of that red line. It's confusing. It still drops a little, but it's not as a dramatic hump. And whoosh, then it starts dropping. So that's what the bigger driver size really does. It gives you more mid bass. So when you see the giant 15-inch woofer, it does not mean that you are getting the deep frequency that much more. It means that it can feel your mid bass better because that size of the driver can couple the best to the mid bass. And the deep bass extension is really the work of your port. So the port is giving you the deep bass. How do we know that? So let's have a look what's going on. How can we tell what the port is doing? Here in the SPL, we click on that button, and instead of that, we choose something else. We choose rear port gain. So now we see the output of the port. So this shows at which frequency the port operates the best. So if we click here, you see 42 hertz. So this port is the strongest at 42 hertz. And if we go towards a higher frequency, let's say if we pick here almost 60 hertz, then it shows like minus 11.5 dB. Here, what was it? Minus 2.5 dB. So basically we are 9 dB low for the port output at 60 hertz compared to its peak output. So the port is tuned to a specific frequency, means that the majority of the output is going to happen there. And if you go higher in the frequency, the port starts closing and it has less and less output. And the same thing happens at the base, at the deeper frequencies. As you go lower in frequency, the port starts closing again. So what happens to this area of mid bass? Why do we hear anything? We hear it because even though the port is closing, but the driver from the front, it's the front waves that you are hearing as the bass in this area, and the deep bass you are hearing from the port. So basically, when your driver cone is working, the air that it's pushing towards you or pulling, so the front, what happens in front of the cone that you can see, that creates this frequency region from like 60 hertz on up to all the way up. And what happens to below the 60 region? It is being generated from the air that's inside your cabinet, pushed out through the port. That's where the energy is coming from. And when the output, when the port is closing, at this point it's giving the ball back to the driver, to the front of the driver. So here, as the port closes, the loudspeaker's frontal output is going to take over again. But because it's very inefficient at those frequencies, it's not going to have any significant output. The SPL of the output here from the front of the cone will be negligible, and at the same time the cone will work like crazy trying to produce your frequencies. And when you blow your woofer, that's when you blow your woofer, when you want to reproduce the region that's way below the tuning frequency of the port. That's when it blows. Why? We will look at it at the next episode. Please like, subscribe. Have an awesome day. Bye bye.